He looks like your dead son." The words slipped into the cold night like a knife through silence. They were spoken not with malice, but with the haunting softness of recognition. And in that instant, time seemed to freeze. The city had been drowning in December rain, its streets shimmering with reflections of neon lights, its alleys echoing with hurried footsteps of people eager to escape the storm. But for Jonathan Richardson, a millionaire who had built his empire brick by brick, the world stopped when his girlfriend, Victoria, whispered those words. Her eyes had locked onto a boy sitting by the entrance of a luxury hotel. He was young, no older than 15, his clothes torn, his body shivering against the chill. The cardboard beneath him was soaked through, his hands pressed tight around his knees for warmth. To anyone else, he was just another shadow in the city, another forgotten face in the endless sea of the homeless. But to Victoria, he was something else. His eyes, though dulled by exhaustion, mirrored the same shape and sorrow as the boy she had once known, the boy she had buried 5 years ago, Jonathan's only son. Jonathan followed her gaze, his heart tightening in his chest. The resemblance was undeniable. The same dark curls falling across his forehead, the same hollow cheeks, the same quiet defiance in his stare. And in that moment, the carefully constructed walls Jonathan had built around his grief began to crack. The boy's name was Jamal, though no one here cared to know it. He had been invisible for so long that he barely remembered the last time someone had truly looked at him. Yet tonight, under the glare of the hotel's golden lights, two pairs of eyes held him in a way that made his heart race. One filled with recognition, the other with pain. The rain fell harder, as though the heavens themselves wept at the cruel trick of fate. For what began as a glance on a stormy night was about to unravel years of buried sorrow, unanswered questions, and a story that would test the very meaning of family, love, and humanity. Why can't you look at him? Are you afraid he'll remind you of the son you lost? The question echoed inside Jonathan's head, though no one had spoken it aloud. It was his own heart that whispered the cruel truth. For days after that night, in the rain-soaked city, Jonathan could not erase the image of the boy from his mind. Jamal's face haunted him like a phantom, reappearing in the stillness of his penthouse, in the reflection of his glass office windows, even in the silence of his empty dining table. He had spent years burying grief beneath work, wealth, and the illusion of control. Yet now, one homeless boy had torn open every wound. Victoria, however, did not let the matter fade. To her, the resemblance was not just uncanny, it was destiny. She spoke of it with urgency, insisting that Jonathan couldn't simply walk past a child who carried his son's face. She reminded him of the night she had seen Jamal's eyes, how they had looked exactly like the eyes of the boy she once held during family holidays, only to later hold at a funeral. But Jonathan resisted. He convinced himself that helping the boy would only deepen his pain. He told himself it was coincidence, nothing more. Yet at the same time, he found himself taking detours through the same streets where Jamal often sat. Each time, his chest tightened when he saw the boy curled beneath soaked newspapers, his lips trembling from the cold. Jamal's life was a cruel reflection of neglect. He had grown up in foster care, passed from one temporary home to another until he finally slipped through the cracks. He had learned early that the world did not have room for children like him, black, poor, unseen. Yet despite his hunger, despite the ache in his bones from endless nights on concrete, he carried himself with quiet resilience. It was that resilience that reminded Victoria of Jonathan's son, the way he had once fought against illness with the same stubborn fire. The city itself became part of this cruel play of fate. The marble floors of Jonathan's offices gleamed with excess, while only blocks away, Jamal searched trash bins for scraps. Two worlds that should never have touched were inching closer, pulled together by grief, memory, and something neither Jonathan nor Jamal could yet name. Jonathan's empire had been built on ignoring pain his own and that of those beneath him, but now, every time his eyes met Jamal's, the illusion crumbled. The boy was no longer invisible. He was a mirror, a living reminder, and perhaps, a second chance. But would Jonathan accept what fate had placed before him? Or would his fear of reopening old wounds keep him from stepping closer? The storm outside was not yet over, and neither was the one within his soul. If he walk away this time, he may not survive the night. The thought struck Jonathan like thunder on a silent sky. It wasn't spoken aloud. It came from somewhere deeper, his own conscience, clawing its way through years of silence. That winter evening, Jonathan's car slowed at the corner of a dimly lit street. There, huddled beneath a flickering neon sign, Jamal lay curled against the wall, his body trembling violently from the bitter cold. His thin arms wrapped around his knees, his lips cracked, his breath shallow. He looked less like a teenager, and more like a ghost on the edge of disappearing. Jonathan gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, fighting the urge to drive past. But something about Jamal's fragile frame, illuminated by the unforgiving streetlight, stopped him. In that moment, Jonathan no longer saw a homeless boy. He saw his son. He saw the hospital bed, the pale skin, the lifeless stillness. After the final breath, his chest tightened until it felt like his heart might shatter all over again. The world outside his car seemed to blur, as if time itself had frozen. The honking cars, the city noise, all of it faded, leaving only two figures tethered by invisible pain. One, a man imprisoned by grief and wealth. The other, a boy abandoned by the world and left to fight alone. Jonathan stepped out. For the first time in years, he let the icy wind bite at his face without hiding behind tinted glass or chauffeurs. His footsteps echoed against the pavement as he approached the boy. Jamel stirred faintly, his eyes opening just enough to reveal exhaustion and fear. But beneath the fear was something else, something Jonathan had not seen in a very long time. Hope Victoria's words rang in his memory like prophecy. "He looks like your dead son." But now Jonathan realized it wasn't just resemblance. It was opportunity. It was life offering him a cruel, fragile, impossible second chance. The decision was no longer about resemblance. It was about responsibility. It was about humanity. And more than that, it was about redemption. Jonathan knew that if he left the boy there, the cold would claim him. If he walked away, it would be no different from turning his back on his own child. And this time, he could not bear to lose him. Sometimes, the person you save ends up saving you. Those words would come to define Jonathan Richardson's life. But in the beginning, all he knew was that he couldn't let Jamal go. The millionaire who once built walls of glass, steel, and money around himself suddenly opened the doors of his mansion to a boy who had nothing. At first, it was awkward. Jonathan's silent halls echoed with footsteps that didn't belong to his son, and his staff looked on with quiet confusion. Jamal, too, struggled. Years on the streets had taught him not to trust kindness. He ate quickly, hid food in his pockets, and flinched whenever someone raised their voice. But Jonathan didn't push. He simply gave what had once been denied: warm meals, clean clothes, a safe bed, and above all, patience. Slowly, the boy's eyes began to change. The hollow fear was replaced by a spark, faint at first, but undeniable. He started to laugh. At the smallest things, the taste of hot chocolate, the warmth of a blanket fresh from the dryer, the sight of Christmas lights glowing through frosted windows. Victoria, too, softened. Though she had spoken those piercing words without thinking, she now became part of the healing. She helped Jamal with school applications, encouraged him to dream, and reminded Jonathan that this wasn't about replacing a son, it was about giving a boy a future. The mansion, once a museum of grief, slowly transformed into a home again. The cold December air, that once carried memories of loss, now echoed with the sound of two lives rebuilding. Jonathan found himself smiling without realizing it, speaking without rehearsing it, and living without merely existing. He discovered that the act of saving someone else was also saving himself from the prison of sorrow. Years later, Jamal stood tall, no longer the shivering boy under a neon sign. He was a young man with ambition, dignity, and love of future, carved not from chance, but from the courage of one man to act when the world looked away. And Jonathan, the man who once drowned in regret, found his redemption not in money, not in power, but in the simple act of seeing humanity where others saw nothing. He learned that grief can break you, but it can also rebuild you, if you let love lead the way. The story of a millionaire and a homeless boy was no longer one of tragedy. It became a living testament that even the deepest wounds can give birth to the most powerful healing. Because sometimes, when life closes one door forever, it quietly opens another, offering not the past we lost, but the future we didn't know we needed. And in that future, Jonathan discovered the greatest truth of all. Love doesn't end with loss, it begins again in the lives we choose to save.